welcome to the second of our online conversations with our Harrogate and Knaresborough candidates. I'm Tim Larner, I'm the Vice Chair of Zero Carbon Harrogate. This is Jemima Parker, who chairs Zero Carbon Harrogate, and it's good to have Andrew Jones, our retiring MP at the moment, who knows what in a month's time, with us today. Thank you for coming. We realise this is a very busy time for you, and we appreciate you making the space to have this conversation. We'd like you to introduce yourself, but perhaps I can show all the research I've done and say how much we think we know about you, and you can probably right where I go wrong. But I think you're a relatively local lad.
Yes,
born in Ilkley, went to school in Bradford. Unfortunately, you were a decade too old to enjoy the train journey there to Frizinghall, but that came after your time there. But
I used to catch the train there anyway.
You did catch the train to Bradford, right?
Shipley, actually.
To Shipley,
specific,
right.
yes.
Yeah.
But that station wasn't open.
No, that's right. I'm saying you're too old to have taken to enjoy that. I have a connection, which we can talk about later. And then Leeds University, and then 25 years in sales and marketing jobs with various...
25 years in business.
In various companies.
My first job was working for B&Q.
Right.
And my last commercial job was working for Bettis and Taylors.
Yeah, indeed. So, an interesting career before politics, but you got involved with Bradford Borough Council in 2003.
Harrogate Borough Council.
Yeah.
I was elected member for the High Harrogate ward in that year.
Yeah, and so 2 terms, I think.
Yes.
And finished up as chairing finance and resources committee, is that right?
The council doesn't have a committee structure in the sense that they used to have many years ago.
Yeah.
Councils moved to having a cabinet structure, and I was the cabinet member.
You were cabinet members for that, right? And then
that effectively was the council's money, property, people, strategy, IT, that sort of thing. But effectively the money.
Yeah. And then stood for election as a MP in 2010, and have been MP since then.
Yes.
I hope I got most of that right.
You got it right. You got it right.
But it would be lovely if you could just put a bit of colour onto that, and I'm thinking particularly of your sort of political career and how you got interested in politics, what stage of life, was it your upbringing or later on, or what sort of led you into formal politics in terms of a local ward councillor and into becoming an MP?
It's a slippery slope. Basically, I was not interested in politics as a young person. I looked at university politics along with stuff across university and thought, this is grim, what am I going to do with that? My interest comes from interest in current affairs and local community. So I've only ever stood in the area where I live. I live in the High Harrogate ward as was.
Yeah.
And it's from seeing what happens in our area and desiring to influence it. Then the opportunity arose to become a candidate, the opportunity arose then to actually execute as a councillor, and then in 2010 to take that on a further level. So politics for me has always been very local and really anchored in where I live. I've not sought representation anywhere else apart from my own street. The issues, well, I think it's a very interesting area, because if I look around our community and country, I think we have many real positives but many significant issues where we need to make real progress. And it was a desire to get stuff done in my area that really engaged my interest. I know that having spoken with Zumar on a number of occasions, we've discussed environmental issues, and they have always been pretty important for me. For example, the first thing I think I did as a councillor was work on a project to bring in ground source heat pumps to off-grid council houses.
Right.
A project considered extremely peculiar at the time, now not considered so. Now it's a little bit more prescient. But people came from all over the country to have a look at this, but it was a genuine UK first.
Right.
when I became the cabinet member for resources, one of the first things I did was create the Environmental Initiatives Fund. So it has been a bit of a running theme throughout representation.
Right.
To put a bit of other colour on things, it isn't just politics that people do. I thoroughly enjoyed my commercial career. I did 25 years of it, and I launched products, brands, services, companies, export programmes. I went into Parliament in 2010 as one of the more experienced of that intake, but with significant commercial experience. Yeah. Outside that, I'm extremely fond of cricket.
I forgot to mention that, sorry.
I haven't got to be able to see very much of it recently, but Yorkshire Cricket Club is, well, I've been a member of it for 40 years now.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. So politics, national politics has changed dramatically over even just over 14 years in
Yes.
terms of and you've always been on the government side of the House in doing that. And you've had a number of different interesting jobs as a junior minister in different departments.
Two departments, yeah.
And I know you're particularly interested in transport, and continue that in terms of your backbench memberships of groups and what have you.
Yes, that's always been an interest.
Yeah.
We can cover that in detail, or if you want.
Well, I think we'll get on to transport later,
We'll back to that.
but I mean, you must have seen a massive, policy change over that period, as particularly as regards environmental issues and climate change and what have you. I glanced at the 2019 manifesto this week just to sort of do a comparison, and thought, yes, I could have quite easily voted for the 2019, but then I got something different from that over the past 5 years, and I'm not sure I want to vote for the 2024 version. I don't want to sort of intrude on a painful political period, because it's been a bit of a roller coaster over that period. But talk to us where you sit in terms of party policy on climate change and net zero and environmental issues generally.
Well, I think that net zero is an absolutely critical issue for us and for every other country in the world. So I think that then means we have a number of policy areas we just need to follow through to deliver that key objective. That objective hasn't changed, but it's certainly fair to say that the last few years it has felt like we have been fighting fires, really. We had COVID, and then straight from COVID into the war in Ukraine. Then it's been really very challenging indeed. The government has had to restrict people's civil liberties. We didn't even do that during the course of the Blitz. So these have been monumentally big decisions and not taken lightly. And those have forced their way into the political centre ground, really, because there was no choice. There was an emergency with COVID. The point, I think, also is that whilst that has been going on, and it has been significant, other things have also been going on. But in terms of COVID and the war in Ukraine, the support that has been provided to help people with either the cost of living or through furlough schemes, that has been £500 billion of government expenditure, £500 billion of unplanned expenditure, and that has changed the debate very fundamentally. So it's been a remarkable 5-year period.
Yeah, indeed. But I mean, you set out your stall there in terms of your concern about the environment and your desire to see, I don't know about the heat pumps, but I mean, that's fantastic, that far ahead, that even, I screwed up my courage in 2017 to, are these things actually going to work, and we did. But at that time, it was very much groundbreaking stuff to go with that. Yeah, I mean, has any of that pivot away or sort of delaying net zero action, has that caused you personal angst? Because you're well known as a sort of relatively loyal Conservative member who votes with your party. Has that caused you difficulty in doing that?
Well, we haven't moved away from it. Net zero is enshrined in law. That was passed into law in 2019, and we have carbon budgets to achieve along the way to that objective. So it hasn't changed. In fact, our carbon budget progress has been very positive. We have hit our first 3 carbon budgets, and we are ahead of schedule to hit carbon budget 4. Carbon budget 4, 2023 to 2027, 52% reduction on 1990. Well, we've hit 50% in year 1 of that period. So we are ahead of schedule to hit number 4. So I don't really accept that we've pushed it back because the law hasn't changed.
Right.
Although the UK Committee on Climate Change, the body that sets those targets and is the independent body that monitors them, has on a number of occasions raised quite grave concerns about policies in place and rollback on policies, warning that future targets won't be met. So,
well, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I personally think the future targets will be met. They are being met, and we are ahead of schedule for the next target. So I'm not sure I agree with their analysis, to be honest. What has changed? There was a delay on electric vehicles.
Yep.
And there was a target to have electric vehicles only from 2030, that's moved back to 2035. That didn't trouble me unduly, actually, because certain things also came forward. The idea that with 25 years out you'll be able to predict perfectly every single work stream, the timing of the supply chain across a global supply chain network is not that likely, quite frankly. So there will be changes. Things will come forward, things will go back. But the big picture is the target is being hit, and the overall target hasn't changed. We are a long way ahead of other countries, and that has influenced the capacity of supply chains. So we aren't yet seeing the cost benefits of electric vehicles collapsing in price because of mass production. That's the heart of this. So when we had that change, an electric vehicle is still quite an expensive thing, and not everybody can afford it. So the suggestion was we're producing laws that people really can't comply with unless you're really quite affluent. That isn't sensible. It's because we're just so far ahead of other countries. We needed to just catch up on other areas. So when that announcement was made, what was also made was the increase by 50% in the boiler upgrade scheme. So that came forward. Didn't achieve any media coverage, but it was made at the same time. I think we've got to take people with us. That's the bottom line. We've got to take people with us. And I think there are genuine concerns. I look at this as a really positive agenda. It is obviously critical in terms of the mitigating, stopping climate change, but this is a really positive thing in that we are improving our communities, improving our economy and changing. And we're often describing these things in a disastrous way, making them negatives when we should be making them positives.
yeah, no, and I would totally agree with you out there, Andrew, because I think it's actually a lot of the messaging around net zero is doom and gloom for our economy, and we're actually not looking at the benefits of the transition.
Make it all positive.
Yeah.
It is a positive. I think that we should be looking at people's concern for our environment in the broadest possible sense, and looking at it and thinking, this is fantastic. Everybody is really very engaged in this. It might be in different forms, but we have to make sure we take people with us with some of the measures on net zero.
So just zooming out a bit,
Okay.
Andrew, what would you say were the sort of top policy areas in terms of getting to net zero? What would, in your mind, what are the kind of key things that we need to do nationally, but what are the key things that for us as a Harrogate and Knaresborough area, Harrogate and Knaresborough constituency,
Okay.
that we need for this transition to net zero?
Right, well, let's look at two areas, both substantial in terms of carbon emissions. One is energy and the other is transport. Let's take energy first of all. Energy is actually, again, I think, a bit of significant progress. We have grown our economy by 80% whilst cutting carbon emissions by 50%. So I want to make sure people understand that the two things can work together. They are not incompatible. We have increased radically the renewable electricity generated in the UK. When I became an MP, it was 6.8% of total electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's nearly 50%. So that is a big change.
The price of renewables have fallen significantly, haven't they? So
yes,
it actually becomes the cheapest way to generate electricity.
Which is the point about supply chains catching up and creating the economies of scale, going back to the previous thing we were just talking about. Yeah, the cost of offshore wind has gone down by 70% in the last 8 years. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
The contracts for difference, which we're familiar with as a mechanism for getting the investments we need into the North Sea. I had responsibility for these as Treasury Minister. They've been a huge success.
And it's, I mean, the electricity price is just now artificially high because it's pinned by the gas price. We have a sticking point there, don't we? Energy is one.
So energy is one.
And just bringing that to.
But again, it's good progress.
Yeah.
Good progress in the sense that, quite frankly, from 6.8 to 50, that is a giant leap, and that has driven much of the overall net carbon reduction. The areas where there are still quite a few things to be sorted out, are grid, transmission and distribution. That was really set up for a few very large inputs, and we're not in that place anymore. We're now looking at significant quantities of smaller inputs. We've had obviously the Windsor review, which you'll be familiar with. It's how to reform the grid. The key thing is to implement the Windsor findings. It's taking too long to get stuff done in the grid, and we've seen a system where there have been blockages, effectively. Projects which probably may never go live have nevertheless got precedence over projects which could go live quite quickly. This was brought to my attention actually by a company in Knaresborough called Harrogate Energy, and a very interesting company. They opened the largest battery farm in Europe quite recently. They're not based, the battery farms aren't in Knaresborough, the company is based in Knaresborough. And they highlighted some of the issues, and I was very pleased to be able to take those up, ask questions in the House, and I raised it with the Prime Minister. So it's been an important area, but so work to be done there.
I was going to say that grid connection is something that over the years we've had a few conversations about in the past, and that being such a sticking point and a barrier.
Yes, it was a significant barrier, and we just need now to get on and implement the Windsor reports. I think it's been very widely accepted as a very important and helpful piece of work. The areas where energy, and you asked, I think leading into local questions about energy.
Yes,
okay. I thought that's where you were going.
Yeah.
That I think is actually encouraging people to get much more involved in microgeneration. We do have some larger schemes. For example, there is a proposal for a solar farm around Farnham and out towards Scotland, very large space. I don't think this is a very good idea because I think that solar is a good idea, but we also need to improve our resilience in food, and that is prime agricultural land. So I don't want to see our best agricultural land go into solar. So I think there are other things that we should be doing first with it.
Are you happy with low-grade agricultural land going to solar, such
Yes,
as grazing land? Because you can, there are many solar farms that have sheep grazing underneath them, or livestock grazing around them.
And getting maximum use out of a finite amount of space is exactly how we'll have to do it. The same will apply with buildings. Roofs, I can imagine very shortly we'll be seeing some interesting proposals to put solar roofs on lots of car parks, for example. So maximum use, we have a finite amount of space.
Yeah.
We need to improve energy resilience, food resilience. Let's work to make that happen.
And are the policies, forgive me, I haven't committed your Conservative manifesto to heart yet, perhaps you haven't done it. Are there policies in the manifesto which are going to support that transition to more reliance on microgrids? So
in the manifesto, it says implement the Windsor reports.
Right, okay.
But that is basically a continuation of where we were before the manifesto, to be perfectly honest. The manifesto talks about having a diversity of energy sources and making sure that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket by any means. If that diversity will reduce our exposure to shocks. We aren't immune to global price changes, but we weren't facing an actual existential level of supply, as other countries were when Putin basically decided to weaponise energy supply.
And I mean, that's taught us a huge lesson, hasn't it, within the UK?
Globally,
and globally. And on a local basis, I'm conscious that actually we're talking about potential for a big solar farm locally, but we actually generate virtually no energy locally.
Yeah.
And effectively we're importing it, and that has a cost associated with it.
We have a good yeah.
So that
I'm fully in favour of microgeneration, as we've just been discussing.
Yeah.
So I think that's what the future will look like. A radically diversified in terms of scale and in terms of source for energy production.
But we're still building houses that don't use their roof space, for instance, because there's no requirement to do that. I mean, what's your view on that?
Well, I think it needs to change, doesn't it? I would be very keen to see that change. Supposedly the new home towns, they've been a long time in production, and the talk in Parliament was actually just about to be launched when the election came along. So I would expect whoever wins the election to be going down this route pretty quickly into the new Parliament. And I would suggest that will be a positive thing.
And you're comfortable with new houses having heat pumps rather than gas central heating?
It will, yeah. We'll have to
or
just see.
Or an alternative.
Form of renewable heating.
Yes. I think we'll probably have to look at the way we heat houses. It could even be looking at hydrogen grids or mixtures of stuff. So I think to say everything is about a heat pump.
Well,
I don't think that's quite right.
No, but it's fine. Yeah, that's how I'm telling you often. It's finding the right heat source for the right location, isn't it? And having that mix and diversity.
Yes, it is.
Appropriate for each setting.
I see hydrogen playing quite a role.
Good. I was going to ask you about hydrogen and what your views on hydrogen were, and what role that has to play going forward, and what investment you would see from national government in the hydrogen group going forward.
Well, hydrogen can play a role in a couple of different areas. Firstly, hydrogen is being seen as an answer to all problems. It probably isn't quite that. But
there's no one silver bullet, is there, for this net zero transition? It has to be quite diverse and complex.
It's hard work and hard choices, and that's why I really believe very strongly about taking people with you point that we were discussing a few minutes ago. Hydrogen, I think, will play a role in transport and in heating homes. I think we're going to be seeing electric cars. and probably also electric vans, but larger modes of transport, I think we're probably looking towards hydrogen. We're probably going to be seeing that in the world of rail, for example, and there's some interesting projects. You know, I certainly, as a Transport Minister, approved research grants to develop alternative methods of production, methods of power for trains. So I see a real mix. I've driven a hydrogen car, and it felt just like any other car. Well, who knew?
Indeed, it's
Who
not.
knew?
These new technologies aren't things that we necessarily need to be frightened of.
We shouldn't be frightened of.
It's that raising awareness.
I cut the ribbon to, as a minister, to open one of the UK's first hydrogen fueling stations at the National Physical Laboratory in Bushy Park, and that was again quite some years ago. But I was very keen to push that forward. That was in 2016.
So, and we've started to talk about transport, so perhaps if we move on to that, because I know our time is moving on. So, in terms of decarbonising transport, and again, if you can pin this down to what needs to happen locally, so that we can kind of visualise what your vision for local transport would be.
Right.
As we decarbonise, that would be really helpful.
Right. Transport accounts for 28 to 30% of our overall carbon emissions. So we will not hit our net zero target if we don't make progress in transport.
And transport has pretty much been flatlining, hasn't it? Well, as you say, I mean, energy, we've made major reductions in the last sort of 15, 20 years, but transport emissions have been quite stagnant.
We're emitting significantly less carbon per mile travelled, but we're travelling many more miles.
Yep.
So transport is holding its overall share rather than seeing its share fall. So that's the point, it's a market share point. And it doesn't really matter how the market share particularly, we just won't hit our overall target if we don't make transport progress. I think that will be a mixture of public and private. We've talked a little bit about electric vehicles. We'll have hydrogen for larger vehicles. I think much needs to be done to encourage the world of buses. Now, I know we've talked about buses. I'm a big bus fan. The green bus schemes that we've had for quite a few years, they predate me as a minister, but I was able to launch bus schemes that have been taken on by some of my successors. In fact, it was a source of some significant pride that I launched a scheme, and then we benefited from it.
We're very fortunate to have the Harrogate Bus Company and Transdev who are so forward-thinking and proactive, aren't we, locally?
Yeah. And we will shortly be seeing the second half of that fleet arrive, so we will have 100% electric fleet, including double-deckers, which wasn't an option some years ago. So this is overall a really positive thing. So the key thing with our new buses is to encourage more bus routes, particularly out into some of the newer estates as our towns are expanding, and to encourage usage. You don't want to have these fantastic new vehicles transporting air around the nation. We want them with people on them. Let's look at something else and make a significant change, and that is on rail. Now, rail has been a big area for my focus, partly to do with environmental issues, obviously. The one train could take 500 cars off the road, but also improving our connectivity drives our economy, and getting London services was particularly important. Getting London services was particularly important because it will be a boost for our tourism and business tourism. That has been a big win, I think. The newer fleet is significantly more environmentally friendly than the old Pacer trains that we got rid of. But Northern are just upgrading their fleet, and they're looking at new hybrid trains. Basically, the next rail project is to get hybrid trains into our area. And we're going to see electrification of the spines of our networks, and then we're going to see hybrid trains with battery hybrids, effectively, delivering for the sort of the smaller spoke parts of the journeys. And that's where our next question on rail should be. So you asked what the vision would be. We've got a great platform of progress being made. We now need to make sure it's used, people know about it. An area where I think we haven't been very strong and could do better is in the more active travel area. I think that the delivery of the Oxley Road cycle scheme could have been better handled. And I have a slight sense as well that ultimately it's more of an overall vision that is required rather than piecemeal projects. Equally, there are more cycle routes than people perhaps realise. The key thing I think with cycling is to segregate man-powered, people-powered vehicles from engine-powered vehicles. And when that's achieved, it becomes a transformed experience on a bike. So significantly
safer. And safety is the main issue there.
So I think quite a bit of work to be done on cycle networks, and then again promote it. So I view the progress that's being made in a really positive way, but we need to do a much better job at selling what we're doing. You can see people having a sort of, I even read an article on the BBC News this week, their website, green lash in Europe. The last thing we need to make sure that people are taken with us on this journey, recognise that it is change, the change is complicated, it's expensive, but it's a question about how we make the transition. The event that you ran at Harrogate College was highly successful. It was your project, it was great. It was great, I was there all day, and I thought it was helpful in telling people how they could set about making changes in their lives.
Behavioural change is difficult. Now I'm conscious we're coming to the close of our time.
Right, okay.
Can I just finish with a couple of quickies? I mean,
Sure.
I think we found working with you as an MP very good. You've always been generous with your time and had us into your office, and that's much appreciated. And we would like to continue that conversation if you be re-elected.
I can confirm right now I have also much enjoyed working with you guys and indeed other environmental groups across our district. My door, if I'm re-elected, would always be open, and I will look to continue that. Basically, I think you make progress by working together.
Indeed.
By bringing, and an MP has great convening powers, and it can take lots of different forms, but on environmental issues, we've got lots and lots of really interesting groups. It could be protecting a particular part of woodland, or it could be tackling balsam, whatever it might be, or it could be zero carbon. I view this as all about care for our planet, and my door will be open.
And I think you mentioned several times the importance of taking people with you, and I think that's perhaps the power of local community organisations, that we haven't got an axe to grind. We've not got a political spin on things. We just want to see things happen locally, and we want to use our power as well. And as you say, we can put on events and what have you, and we hope that you would continue to support us in doing that.
No question. I think it's very successful, and I think that you can see that in the fact that our area has got the highest electric vehicle take-up across our county, for example. Or the fact that Harrogate will, and Knaresborough as well now, will be the cleanest bus areas in our nation. So there's a lot of really good things going on, especially taking that on to the next level.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's been a pleasure to chat with you, and hopefully our audience will have had the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. We're looking forward to seeing you next week at our husting event on the Wednesday the 19th. And in the meantime, we wish you all the best as your campaign continues. I appreciate it's hard work. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
I was going to say we could have been here for 7 more hours.
Yeah.
We didn't touch on a whole range of topics.
Well,
Agriculture, planning,
Retrofitting
retrofitting
houses.
houses.
yeah.
It's just, I mean, environmental